Hello and welcome to Gamer Radio Zero, show number 32. I'm your host, Mike Lasco, also known as Gamer Zero, and I'd like to welcome you back. We have an excellent show this week. James Wyatt, the lead story designer on Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition for Wizards of the Coast, comes onto the show. And he talks about the Players Handbook, specifically the races in the Players Handbook. And we kind of get a little down and dirty about the details of that. And he's also nice enough to give us a little hints about what races we might be seeing in the Players Handbook II. So stay tuned for that. Before we jump into our interview, I just want to give you a little update about the Wizards of the Coast softball team. As I mentioned last week, we were playing our first game at the local field, and it turned out that our game was against the Lacey Bail Bonds team. So I don't know about you, but when I picture your average gamer or your average Wizards of the Coast employee, I get a certain image in my mind, and maybe you do too. And then when I picture your average person that would work for a bail bondsman, I get sort of a little bit of a different image in my mind. Not that, you know, they can't be all extremes, but in general. So, yeah, that's sort of how things went. We played a tough game against a bail bondsman. It was a real squeaker that we ended up losing 44-0. So, we'll see what happens with our following games. I think, you know, it was a close game. Really could have gone either way at the end. The bail bondsman did kind of eke us out. We did learn something interesting. A lot of people who work at Wizards were kind of very interested in rules and that sort of thing. We learned the rule. It's called a mercy rule. And I don't know if any of our games have the mercy rule, but in softball, if you're down by so much come a certain inning, the mercy rule kicks in to stop further pain and humiliation. And we get to see that in action, so that was pretty cool. So we'll see what happens, you know, as the season progresses. I don't think there are any major injuries. I think I did sprain my thumb a little bit, so it kind of hurt. But anyways, we'll see what happens, and we'll maybe give a few more updates on that, unless, of course, we continue to lose at that score, in which case you will never, ever hear me mention this again. Enough of that. Let's get right on to the interview. James Wyatt. James Wyatt is the lead story designer on Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition for Wizards of the Coast. He's been on Gamer Radio Zero a few times now. So, James, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So today we want to talk about the Player's Handbook, but I think specifically we want to talk about the races in the Player's Handbook. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe I can get more than one interview out of having you,
okay.
You know, have you come on again. And this time, why don't we focus on just the races, because I think we can talk a lot about that.
Okay.
So what are these humans about?
Humans are kind of a hard race to design because, well, I'm tempted to go into a whole long story. I'm going to try to keep this short. But humans have always kind of been the baseline, and every other race is a deviation from that. We tried to give them a little bit more of a unique identity. They get to do some of the same cool stuff that other races do in terms of they've got an ability modifier now. Actually, a great one, because you can put it anywhere you want, +2 to any ability score.
What is a halfling?
A halfling is a short little guy prone to being obese, no, wait. Halflings are actually athletic, adventuresome, short little people. We actually made them a little taller with this edition because a couple of us have children now who are bigger than we've typically said that halflings are, despite being like 5 years old. So we made them a little taller so that we could live with the idea of being beat up by one in some theoretical D&D world.
How about the dwarf?
Dwarves are what dwarves have always been in D&D. They're short, but stout, strong, sturdy. It's hard to push a dwarf around, literally.
And figuratively, yeah.
Yes. They have great constitution and great wisdom. They make wonderful paladins and clerics and fighters.
Let's talk about the elf.
So I'm going to talk about, actually break away from your list a little bit and talk about the elf and the eladrin at the same time. Okay. Because they are sort of two sides of the same coin. The elf race in D&D has always had kind of a split identity. And on the one hand, you have the woodsy, kind of druidy elves, and on the other hand, you have the very fey, intellectual, arcane elves. And we decided to embrace that difference and make them two distinct races.
How about the half-elf?
It's kind of a funny thing. We're actually seeing half-elves getting played for mechanical reasons. It has been my observation in the past that people who play half-elves are usually doing it because they like the story of the race, that they're kind of torn between two worlds, not part of either one. Tanis half-elven in the Dragonlance books, the first Dragonlance series, is a kind of classic example of that half-elf archetype. But half-elves are adaptable. They're the best multiclassers in the game, and they get kind of a little bit of multiclassing from first level as part of the race.
Tiefling.
So tieflings have been part of the game since, at least, I guess, since 2nd edition. They really came into the forefront in the Planescape campaign setting. They are humans with infernal ancestry, some ties to devils. They have lived in the background of the game as suboptimal player characters for a long time. We embraced them and brought them into Players Handbook this time around because we feel that, again, there's a psychology to the race that a lot of people find appealing, of being kind of the bad boy or bad girl.
Kind of the cursed, sort of carrying that burden. And
right. I always think of tieflings as riding Harleys and wearing leather jackets or T-shirts with the sleeves rolled up and a cigarette.
So sort of the little counterculture, sort of a little bit on the outside. That's awesome. Okay, last but certainly not least, and probably what people are most excited about, the Dragonborn. What is this Dragonborn thing? And all I hear about it is that they don't have pants. So can you talk about this?
I'm looking at the cover of the Player's Handbook here. He's wearing armored leggings.
So he's got armored leg warmers, but still no pants. We're making progress. I know this is a concern that a lot of people brought up. So
that's not what I've heard.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So the Dragon Man idea has been something kind of in the mind of the D&D game for 30 years, and it's had various expressions over the years. One of my favorite early Dragon Magazine monster articles, I remember this two-tone illustration of a big winged Dragon Man guy. It was the Crawley monster. I think they were just presented as a monster and not as a race, but I loved them. And it's the image of this big hulking reptilian guy who harkens back to the iconic monster of the game, right?
Right.
So it's had various implementations and never an implementation. Here is the dragon race, the race that everybody wants to play. We're going to give it to you in the Player's Handbook this time and let it be out there as this is the dragon race that is the default.
So the gnome, I mean, he's a monster now, and I know there's an upside to that and a downside, so...
I'm a monster.
Yeah, exactly, right? So,
so the gnome is in the monster manual. The monster manual has an appendix that will let you play several monsters from that book as characters. But this isn't the last Player's Handbook we're doing. It's not all the classes we're going to do, and it's not all the races we're going to do.
Really? So there's more races coming?
There's more races
Player's
coming.
Handbook 2?
Mm-hmm.
Really? You announced any of those?
I don't think so.
Really? Have any hints? Can you give us like the first letter that some of them begin with?
G.
G?
At least two actually begin
Two begin with G. Any other letters? Come on, people are gonna love this. They're gonna be like, there'll be message board threads everywhere speculating.
All right. We got another D.
Another D.
And we got an H.
Okay. Two G's, a D, an H.
And an S.
And an S. Player's Handbook 2.
Yeah.
James Wyatt, thanks again for coming on to Gamer Radio Zero.
My pleasure,
you're much better
always.
than Hainso. I can't get anything out of him. I'm just like, hey, give me a letter. All right, that's awesome.
Great.
Thanks again.
My pleasure.
That does it for episode number 32 of Gamer Radio Zero. I'd like to thank James Wyatt for coming on and talking with us. And we have a lot of good stuff coming up. Stay tuned for next week and future weeks. We're going to talk more about 4th edition, Player's Handbook, DMG, Monster Manual. We're also going to talk a little bit about Magic Online, Magic the Gathering, Shadow Moors releasing. A lot of interesting stuff coming. So stay tuned and we'll see you next week.